Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast presented by Full Press Coverage. We are also on YouTube, presented by my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JetStryer. You can check it out, like and subscribe, comment on there. I'll always be sure to comment back. And, let us know what you think of the show. Let us know there's other stuff you want us to talk about, because we always love fan engagement. Today we're going to kick off the show doing something we don't normally do and probably will never do again, which is talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team that currently has the worst record in the NBA. Also just happened to sell for a lot of money, $1.5 billion with a B dollars for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The buyer, Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod, the three-time former MVP of Major League Baseball. He is going to be the co-owner and the face of the team, along with his buddy Marc Lore, who is the money in this situation. Not that A-Rod's poor, but we're talking about billions, not millions. Marc Lore is a billionaire who I guess wanted to get into business with A-Rod, and so they've bought the Timberwolves. The weird caveat in this sap is that they're not taking over the team for 2 years until the current owner, Glenn Taylor, is done showing them the ropes. I guess that's how they wanted to go, showing them the ropes of what's been one of the worst franchises in not just the NBA, but all of sports. Good mentor.
Yeah, they got a 30-day negotiating window, and then Glenn Taylor is going to stay on. And this happens in like the real world where, someone sells a restaurant and the owner stays on for 30 or 60 days to make sure the transition is, seamless. I would think if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves, you're like, get Glenn Taylor the hell out of here, because they've been a cluster of bleeds, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The last 30 plus years since he's owned them. He bought them in the late 80s, early 90s for, a small amount of money. And now they're worth $1.5 billion.
$94 million.
To $1.5 billion. So they've gone up 1,700%. And they've been one of the worst, if not the worst, franchises in the NBA over that period of time. That's pretty good. So get him the hell out of there.
So good at business, bad at running a basketball team.
Yeah, he's obviously a billionaire, and he's making more money off of this. And, the Timberwolves, they have some nice talent there. Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, they get another high draft pick. Maybe they get Jalen Suggs, who's from Minneapolis, so now you'd have, I guess, a young big three, although it just doesn't seem to work in Minnesota. So this is weird, because now you've got a former baseball player as the face of the franchise. There's a small similarity in basketball in the Eastern Conference. Aaron Rodgers, the great quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, my favorite football player, owns 1% of the Milwaukee Bucks, but, Green Bay, Milwaukee, same state. It's only a small percentage. He's not the face of the franchise.
Right.
He'll go to a game if they allow fans in and sit courtside and be challenged.
He has no decision-making ability.
Not at all. No, he doesn't even have any decision-making in Green Bay. So that's why I think he's going to be with the Patriots in 2022. That's my hope and dream. But now you bring in Marc Lore, who's the money guy. I mean, is there some similarity to when Magic Johnson was the face of the acquisition of the LA Dodgers? I think he put some money into it. LA. I mean,
Magic's Mr. LA.
He's royalty in LA, like A-Rod, Minnesota, like
no connection.
Seattle, no connection whatsoever. I still think that they're going to move the team at some point. I know we've talked about that there's a long-term commitment to the Target Center, if that's what it's called at this point, where they play.
It's about 10 more years on the Target Center, but there is a buyout for $50 million. And when you're purchasing a team for $1.5 billion, that's not really a big deal if you think that you can move them to, and places that are talked about for expansion teams would be the logical place, right? Las Vegas and Seattle seem to be the two most popular destinations if you're going to move a team. The only market outside of Seattle and LA that would have a bigger TV market than Minneapolis is Tampa Bay, which is where the Raptors are playing this season because of the stuff with COVID in Canada. I don't see A-Rod moving them to Tampa Bay.
No, I mean, the Yankees were headquartered there. He is a Florida guy, but he's more of a Miami guy than a Tampa Bay guy. I can see A-Rod and J-Lo, his significant other, and I don't know if she's involved in this deal or not. She's got more money than Alex Rodriguez. But J-Lo and A-Rod and J-Lo, that screams Las Vegas, doesn't it?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
More so than
she's had
Minnesota.
residencies there, right?
I mean, she could perform in Vegas. He could do whatever in Vegas. Probably cheat on her, and that would be
Harsh,
a great,
but fair.
But fair. Yeah, I mean, he's a slime ball. I mean, he's hoodwinked the entire country. I mean, right? Because I will say this: Alex Rodriguez is the second best baseball player I've ever seen. I've been watching baseball close to 50 years. Barry Bonds is the greatest player by leaps and bounds. And then Alex Rodriguez is number 2. Ken Griffey Jr. would be number 3. Great baseball player. Obviously got popped a couple times for steroids. I don't think he's going to make the Hall of Fame, but he's probably got a better chance than Barry Bonds of making the Hall of Fame because he's a phony, and he's always had a good relationship with the media where Barry Bonds didn't. Barry Bonds was never phony. Barry Bonds had a horrible relationship with the media. Who votes for the Hall of Fame? Members of the media. So I think that, he's such a phony guy. And, I think he's pretty good actually on ESPN and on Fox Sports doing baseball. But obviously when he becomes owner, I would assume that he has to cede those roles. You can't have the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves also working on ESPN and Fox Sports analyzing baseball. That just doesn't seem to make much sense. This guy has everybody hoodwinked. He probably will be allowed to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he'll figure out a way. Listen, he's figured out a way to do the same job for 2 networks.
Which is pretty good.
Who the hell else is able to do that?
Michael Strahan. Michael Strahan does that because
he doesn't do the same
Good Morning
job.
America. He doesn't do the same. He's not a sportscaster with 2 networks. Right. He's and I like Michael Strahan, even though I mispronounced his name a few seconds ago.
You were close enough.
I was close enough. I, maybe have the space in my teeth like he does, and I didn't say the name right. But he's great on Fox, and he's also great at Good Morning America. But 2 different types of jobs. Whereas A-Rod's an analyst for
doing this
both
same thing
ESPN
for both networks.
Fox. I guess you could technically say he's a studio analyst for Fox Sports, and he's a game analyst on ESPN. It's kind of interesting because a good friend of ours. I won't mention his name. I don't want to get him in trouble, but he works at ESPN, and part of the pregame show is to interview A-Rod, and A-Rod doesn't like being called A-Rod, even though that's his Twitter handle. So, I mean, that's the guy he is. I mean, I've heard stories.
Alex?
I guess Alex, yeah.
Okay.
He's just a strange guy. He's a strange
guy.
Yeah,
and
I'm not a big fan. Not a big fan of him personally as a ball player. He was magnificent. I mean, but now I just worry that he's going to. Well, why should I worry? I'm not a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, but maybe moves the franchise, and it just seems like something he would do because he doesn't really care.
Yeah, he has no connection. Neither does Marc Lore. Marc Lore is from New Jersey. Yeah, I hate franchises getting ripped from fan bases. It's not fair. What happened in Seattle was a travesty. It wasn't even attendance related. It's because they sold it to a guy from Oklahoma and he moved the team to Oklahoma. So you always have to be wary when you're selling the team to carpetbaggers who have no connection to the place. So yeah, it's a strange confluence of events, Sap, in that it's 2 guys who have no connection to Minnesota. They're also having the owner who's had virtually no success stay on to show them the ropes of what ropes is he showing them? Where the bathroom is in the in the arena. What to order and what not to order from the concession stands. Like, what does this guy know about running a successful team?
Yeah,
they've been historically horrible for their almost entire existence. They've made 1 Western Conference Finals. That was it.
And that was the year Kevin Garnett was MVP of the league, 2003, 2004. And by the way, Kevin Garnett has always talked about buying into the franchise.
He tried to.
He did, but his relationship with Glenn Taylor, the owner, is gone. I mean, they don't even speak. They don't like each other. I guess Glenn Taylor reneged on some sort of verbal agreement or there was a miscommunication. My whole problem with all of this is there's got to be somebody in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area with enough money to buy the franchise and keep it there, right? I always think of that, like even in Seattle when the Supersonics were being traded. I mean, Seattle's a pretty affluent city. You couldn't find somebody in Seattle to buy
Bill Gates
there. Yeah, I could have done it with his
Steve Ballmer could have done it from years ago.
Yeah, he laid out $2 billion for the Clippers. So, that's my point. There's nobody with enough money in Minnesota that could have bought this team. Unfortunately, Prince passed away several years ago. I think he would have been a phenomenal owner because he was a really good basketball player and a huge basketball fan. But yeah, that Alex Rodriguez, it just doesn't seem right. I'm sure the owner's going to approve this because there's money going back and forth. It's $1.5 billion. But I would not be surprised at all if he moved the team. In fact, I expect him to move the team at some point. You said $50 million to get out of the lease. That's nothing.
Yeah, that actually A-Rod could front the money for that. He can't afford $1.5 billion. That's why he has Marc Lore involved in this. But the $50 million, no problem for A-Rod. It's also, Sap, the part of it that's probably frustrating too to Minnesota fans is that there's all this turmoil going on in the community right now in Minneapolis and in St. Paul and in Minnesota in general, especially with racial stuff. And you typically look at sports teams as things that the community can sort of rally around. And the NBA has done a great job of making sure all their franchises are very active in the community and their players are, free to sort of speak their mind. And I'm not saying it's going to be bad in Minnesota forever, but right now it's not a good situation there. And there's a lot of racial strife, and you're bringing in a new ownership group to a team that has no idea about the community and where to, put their money in the community, where the best places are to be there. So it's a weird time to sell a team. And I guess, Glenn Taylor is staying on, and I'm sure he has more connections to the community. I think he is, at least from there originally, but it's just, there's not one part of this deal that I like. And I'm sure the only part of the deal that the NBA owners like is that it was probably the top bid, because they don't want to give one nickel back. They want all the money, the most money possible to be, allotted to every sale. So if I'm a fan of the Timberwolves, I really don't like it. I think bigger picture too, it's not great because they might move the team. The stuff going on in Minnesota, you could use a strong community presence there, which A-Rod and Marc Lore don't bring.
No, not at all. And if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, an issue has always been acquiring talent. Like, free agents aren't going to Minnesota, and now with the racial unrest in Minneapolis, do you think that young black men are going to want to go play basketball in Minnesota?
No, hell no. The weather's already terrible enough. Then you got this stuff on top of it.
And you may get pulled over because you're driving a nice car and have a confrontation with some, deranged officer who confuses the taser for the pistol, and you pay with it with your life. So, yeah, if I'm a free agent, am I going to the Minnesota Timberwolves with A-Rod as the owner? That's like the last place in the league I'm going. So, and again, I think he's going to move it. And Vegas makes so much sense. Man, that's like just a perfect scenario for him and J-Lo.
Yeah, and some owners and general managers are good at recruiting players. I don't think A-Rod's going to be particularly helpful, especially if you ask the young star of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards, who did not even know who Alex Rodriguez was. They asked him in a press conference, "What do you think about the new owner?" He said, "Who is that?" They said, "A baseball player." He said, "I'd never heard of him." So that just goes to show you the power of baseball in the young African-American community and in the young community as a whole. The guy who you said you've watched baseball for 50 years, second best player you've ever seen, Anthony Edwards has no idea who he even is.
Anthony Edwards was born in 2001. A-Rod retired in 2016. I think he was just pulling our leg. I think he was trolling us, Anthony Edwards. He kind of had like a smirk on his face when he said that. He also claims he was a really good baseball player, Anthony Edwards. So if you're playing baseball at 12, 13, 14, I would think you know who Alex Rodriguez is. Although there are some kids that don't follow sports. They're really good at playing sports, but they're not sports fans. They
Certainly
try
not
to participate
baseball.
and watch. Baseball is the sport that really doesn't have the Q rating that basketball or football have, right? I mean, it's not even close. Look at Mike Trout. He's moving up my ranks as one of the all-time great players. He's been in the league now 10 years. He's phenomenal. I think if Mike Trout walked into the middle of this podcast, we wouldn't know who it was, right? But if any basketball player walked in, we'd know who it was. I mean, the eighth guy on some team's bench, we'd know because that person has more Twitter followers than Mike Trout. And Anthony Edwards, I think, is going to be a star. He's 19 years old. I just love looking at his hair. I know you just recently got a new haircut yourself. I think you should have told whoever did your hair that you wanted the Anthony Edwards look. When I saw him on SportsCenter, kind of trolling, not knowing Alex Rodriguez, he was kind of playing with his hair. I'm like, what a marvelous head of hair that young guy has. Man, he's got it all. Good-looking guy.
My wife cut my hair, so I don't think that she's that adept to be able to do the Anthony Edwards. Nor is my hair the same style.
You don't even have the same amount of hair. I mean, you could put my hair, your neighbor's hair. My neighbor's hair wouldn't be enough to add up to Anthony Edwards' hair. I mean, the guy's a freak athlete, and he's going to be rookie of the year because LaMelo Ball is out for the year. So by default, he'll be rookie of the year. But he's fascinating.
He's worthy. He's had a great year.
Getting better and better and better every day. That's why that's not a bad situation there. Because
I love Anthony Edwards. I love him.
I saw him on SportsCenter the other day. I go, Jet's going to love that guy because he's got a little Jalen Ramsey in him, right?
Yeah, he's hilarious.
He's hilarious too, that's the NBA, and there's more personality in the NBA than all the other major sports.
This was the exchange, Sap. The reporter asked him. He said, "Who is he? A fan?"
Right?
No,
yeah.
A baseball player, and he said,
"Yeah,
oh yeah, I heard he's fixing to be the owner, but I don't know anything about baseball."
But he did say he was a hell of a baseball player. Imagine Anthony Edwards is like
he's also supposed to be a heck of a football player, an incredible football player too.
Yeah,
so great athlete, Anthony Edwards. But I just think it's funny. It does the question that Yahoo posed to it is: does it say more about Anthony Edwards, or does it say more about baseball?
Oh, it's baseball. Yeah, I mean, here's the guy who, was all-time great player, and people like, who, what? Like I said, Mike Trout, best player in baseball, most people wouldn't recognize him.
But like you said, with Magic Johnson owning the Dodgers, that like gives it, there's an LA connection there, and like Magic Johnson, even baseball players like, ooh, Magic Johnson, like this is pretty cool. I can have dinner with Magic. I don't think any prospective basketball free agents are like, ooh, dinner with Alex with A-Rod. I don't think
maybe J-Lo. Maybe J-Lo, although
maybe J-Lo.
But J-Lo's closing in on 50. She's more maybe your generation or the older generation than the current generation. I wonder if Anthony Edwards, maybe he knows who J-Lo is.
I think that she would probably have a bigger impact recruiting free agents than A-Rod, honestly.
Probably, yeah. I mean, she's got cachet.
Yeah. So it's just, like I said, we don't typically talk about the Timberwolves a lot, but between the Anthony Edwards thing and the purchase for $1.5 billion, again with a B, for the Timberwolves, if it was worth talking about. Something we do talk about, it seems like every week, is a new feud of Kevin Durant. This time, he's got his eyes set on your guy, Sap, Shannon Sharpe. The Kevin Durant was feuding with Michael Rapaport last week. Now it's another guy who's on Fox Sports 1. It's Shannon Sharpe this week. Sap, do you want to tell us how this all started, or do you need me to recap it for you?
Yeah, why don't you recap it? You're better at that than I am. But essentially, though, it's that Shannon said something that he attributed to Kevin Durant that Durant says he never said. Because full disclosure, Shannon Sharpe is probably the only person in the country, well, in addition to Nick Wright, that's a bigger LeBron supporter than I am. I think if I was to give out the gold medal, it would go to Nick Wright, the silver would go to Shannon Sharpe, and the bronze would go to me. As far as, unhinged LeBron supporters. What
about the opposite way? The biggest LeBron, anti-LeBron, who gets gold? Skip?
Skip Bayless gets gold, silver, and bronze. I mean, he's still bringing up the 2011 finals.
What is his deal with Drummond? He like every day he's tweeting about, he's like ripping Drummond, Kareem Abdul-Drummond, and saying he's, Clipper. Yesterday he did Clippers and then the greater sign like 30 times, and then Lakers.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Skip is unhinged at times, but you know what? He's laughing all the way to the bank. Signed a new deal with Fox Sports 1 for, I believe, $8.5 million a year.
Just weird. It'll be like at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Neither the Clippers nor the Lakers will play, and he'll just like tweet out, "LeBron's a bum." What's wrong with this guy?
Stuff. Yeah, well, that's how he's built his brand, right? He attacks LeBron James and Aaron Rodgers, who happen to be my two favorite athletes. And Shannon Sharpe loves Aaron Rodgers as much as he loves LeBron James, so that's why I love Shannon Sharpe. But Kevin Durant, and again, you just kind of recap it if you want, Jeff.
Yeah.
They're going back and forth on Twitter, and it's typical Kevin Durant. I mean, he needs a hobby, doesn't he? I mean, he can't help. First of all,
basketball, right?
Should be basketball. He should be playing more. He's not playing, so he's kind of like this cranky old guy that has a cell phone and a lot of idle time. I don't think he's married with kids, so he doesn't have that responsibility.
Right.
You look at someone like LeBron, who's married with 3 kids, so he's got that responsibility. He's running multiple businesses. He's got too many things to do to start engaging on Twitter with, pundits on Fox Sports 1 or washed up or never
No,
were
Kevin
actors
Durant
like
never
Michael
wins
Rapaport.
these. Never wins these because everybody's
Because
like,
he's
just
bigger
what
than
are you
them.
doing? Yeah, he's so much bigger than them.
Michael Rapaport, we talked about him a week and a half ago. I mean, he's a no talentless bum. Shannon I love, but it's still a former NFL player that's talking on Fox Sports 1 every day. I think they get about 200,000 viewers a day, which isn't a lot. I think ESPN beats them 3 or 4 to 1 in that particular time frame. But nonetheless, here he is fighting with Shannon Sharpe. He fights with like 17-year-olds on Twitter.
Anybody and everybody. Doesn't care
Anybody.
who it is.
I'm going to start tweeting at him. I'm going to start tweeting at him in the finals. Maybe he'll have
if
his
you
phone
say
with
negative
him.
stuff about, he'll respond to you. One way or the other, I think he will.
He
doesn't
must have
care
an
how many followers
algorithm,
you have.
right? He has an algorithm that if it comes up negative,
I think he just types in his name
there.
and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. I think that's what he does in his downtime, Seth.
You know
honestly.
what? Game 7 of the finals, he'll be on the court. He probably is going to have his phone on the bench, and I'm going to troll him, and it's going to end up with the Lakers winning the NBA championship.
And then you'll get a ring.
I'll get a ring, and I'll get a share. I'll get some sort of share from LeBron.
So Shannon, just to very, very quickly recap this, Shannon attributed some quote to KD that was either misquoted, a fake quote, something along those lines. The quote was, "People try to discredit my rings, but honestly, I feel like they're the most valuable of our era. People argue LeBron is the GOAT, but if I beat him in back-to-back finals, then what does that make me?" So that doesn't seem – I think that's not a real quote. It may be a sentiment that he has, but I don't think he actually ever said that.
I hope not, because that's lunacy.
We've heard that's how he feels, though. We've heard scuttlebutt from that's how that is more or less how he feels, and that's where some of his frustration lies. Durant got pissy, because Shannon took that and ran with it and said, that's ridiculous. Obviously, like you said, Shannon's a huge LeBron guy. He said more or less that's ridiculous. Durant took exception, as he always does, and said, "Y'all drunk uncle out here lying again." Talking about Shannon Sharpe, saying that he got duped by a fake quote. The two of them go back and forth, Shannon saying, take it off Twitter, come on the show, whatever. Shannon blocked Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant said, "Oh, I'm the sensitive one." Back and forth, stupidity as you would expect. But the same story as when we talked about Rapaport a week ago, Sep. What is he doing? Why does he care? I know this is Shannon's a bigger media figure than Rapaport, who's a D-list figure, and Shannon's maybe a B-list figure. But still, even if it's a fake quote and you want to address it as a fake quote, just be like, "Yeah, I never said that." Instead, calling people a drunk uncle, trying to bait people to get into Twitter feuds. What is he doing? It's just he's the most miserable SOB on planet Earth.
Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, said this is an issue in the NBA. Not all the players react like Kevin Durant does, but a lot of them are just unhappy. I mean, you're playing a sport you love. You're making a ton of money. You're adored by fans. You've got a great sneaker contract. You're an all-time great player, already one of the 20 greatest players of all time with an opportunity to move into the top 10. I think other than LeBron, he's the only active player that has that chance. LeBron, I have at number 1 anyway, but Durant does have that opportunity to move into the top 10 all time. He's a marvelous player. He was someone everybody loved when he won his MVP in 2014. It was one of the best, if not the best, MVP speech. He had people in tears. He seems like a good guy who's just kind of so thin-skinned that he can't help himself. There's a little bit of David Price in him. David Price was constantly bickering with people. Durant's a bigger star and better at what he does than David Price. I also think that Durant obviously is a great player. I think the second best player in basketball. He thinks he's better than LeBron, but no one thinks that other than Skip Bayless and maybe Kevin Durant's mother. I mean, most everybody will tell you that LeBron James is greater than Kevin Durant.
Skip Bayless, in his heart, there's no way he can actually believe that. I'm sorry. I don't know how anybody could believe that. It doesn't make any sense.
Jed, he has LeBron as the 8th or 9th greatest player of all time. Everybody has LeBron at least in the top 4. Most have him in the top 2. I'm in the minority with the likes of Nick Wright and Shannon Sharpe that have him at number 1. No one has LeBron James 8th or 9th all time. That's ridiculous. He's blown past Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Kobe Bryant. I'm sorry. He has. But I think Durant...
And if he's blown past those guys, and he's blown way the hell past Durant, who hasn't gotten past those guys.
And Durant's never going to be better than LeBron. Now, my favorite football player can be thin-skinned as well, in Aaron Rodgers. And I've always compared Rodgers and Durant a little bit.
Passive-aggressive thin skin. Durant is aggressive thin skin.
Right. And Aaron Rodgers, I don't think would stoop to like going at it on Twitter with people. That's like beneath him because he's kind of a snobby guy and doing a great job on Jeopardy, by the way. He's a snob without question, and that's one of the reasons I like him so much. I don't think he sets off the aura. I do like snobs, especially really wicked talented ones. But their games are similar in a sense that like Kevin Durant's the best pure scorer we've ever seen, right? Most varied scorer we've ever seen. I can say that. And Aaron Rodgers to me is the most pure passer I've ever seen. Brady's the better quarterback, like LeBron's the better basketball player. And I think at some point Rodgers has said, well, I'm never going to surpass him. He's got 7 Super Bowls now. Durant is thinking, hey, I beat him twice, even though he had a stacked team. And LeBron, especially in the second finals, was playing with garbage. Dellavedova, that was in the earlier one. And after that, it was Jeff Green was his best player. But I think it's almost like he can never do good enough. Even if the Nets win this year, how much does Durant elevate his status? I mean, because you got Harden.
Virtually none. It'll barely move the needle. It'll elevate Harden and Kyrie far more than it'll elevate Durant.
Right. Because
Harden the most, then Kyrie, then Durant.
Because in the all-time pecking order, those guys have room to grow.
Yeah.
Durant, he's going to have to kind of do something on his own at some point or close to that to be up there with, say, Kobe or Duncan at 8 and 9 all time. So, yeah, it just seems like he just can't win in the court of public opinion, and he kind of pushes back against that, and this is his way of doing that. Put the phone down.
It drives him crazy.
It does.
It does.
Just put the phone down. Why? First of all, Michael Rapaport, that was embarrassing. I could see Shannon because, Shannon's a national broadcaster, so, he wants to go at it.
LeBron going at it with Skip all the time.
He wouldn't stoop himself. And Skip hates Aaron Rodgers. I don't see Aaron Rodgers, tweeting at Skip Bayless. Now, he holds that in the back of his mind. That kind of does drive him somewhat.
Yeah, Brady does the same thing with Max Kellerman, but then he wins the Super Bowl and tweets out the clip of Max Kellerman saying he fell off a cliff 10 years ago. That, by the way, one of the all-time worst takes.
Yeah, and Max had to live with that. Now Max is kind of overcompensated and it's like, doesn't want to go there. He's like, I'm not betting against this guy. Now, I want to compare that to the way Jason Tatum handled something. Now, Jason Tatum is 23, Kevin Durant's 32, so there's a 9-year difference. You'd think that Durant would be more seasoned. Kendrick Perkins called out Jason Tatum on Twitter after the Celtics lost to Philadelphia, and Tatum looked disengaged, had bad body language. And Kendrick Perkins called him out on Twitter, and we found out recently that they actually had a phone conversation. That's cool, right? Because I think Perkins is really well respected.
I think Tatum called him.
Tatum called him. Now, here's the difference. Perkins is an ex-player with a championship. Durant's feuding with the washed-up or talentless actor in Michael Rapaport, a comedian in name only, and he's feuding with a guy who's a great football player, but is not tied to the basketball community, and Shannon Sharpe. So Perkins does have more cachet than
and by
Shannon.
The way,
Shannon's
doing his job. This is what his job is to have hot takes.
He's paid to give opinions. Exactly. And what are you supposed to do if you're sitting across Skip Bayless, who's just constantly saying Durant's better than LeBron? Are you supposed to just sit there and go, yeah, I kind of agree with you? No, that'd be horrible TV, wouldn't it? I mean, first of all, you probably go the first time you did that, is this guy serious about
Felger
this?
and Maz. That's what you would have.
No, then you have Felger and Maz. Well, you're right, Mike. You're so right, Mike. So I think that, Tatum handled this like a pro, and it's worked. I mean, they won 4 games in a row since that, but they had a conversation, and Perk was like, look, I'm on your side. I mean, he's a Celtic, Kendrick Perkins. He still bleeds green, but he does such a great job as an analyst that he criticized Jason Tatum, who looked like he was a little disengaged that night, bad body language.
Who can criticize Kevin Durant? Who can do it? That he would not freak out about? Anybody?
Not Kobe Bryant, because he's passed away. I mean, I'm thinking of a former player.
I think he would get pissed off if anybody said anything. That's what
he had problems. Charles Barkley, he had problems with. He had problems with Shaq. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Problem Steve Kerr, his own coach.
Steve Kerr, Draymond Green. I don't know if he had any problem with Steph Curry, because Steph is probably the easiest guy to play with. but he seems to have problems with everybody. And there's an old saying, if you have problems with everyone, it's not everyone, it's you.
Right? You're the problem.
He's the common denominator. Yeah, like everybody else is getting along fine, and Kevin Durant continues to feud. He just doesn't seem happy for a guy who should be happy. And look, I don't know what goes on in someone's personal life, but I was really impressed the way Tatum handled that, calling Kendrick Perkins, and let's talk like two adults here. It
showed a want to be better and a want to to I think have an amicable relationship with Kendrick Perkins, because Perkins didn't say anything. It was like, hey, I think this guy sucks or is a bum. He was like, he was doing his job. He was analyzing what was happening in front of him. Yeah. So credit. Yeah. I think Tatum deserves credit for that. And Kevin Durant deserves criticism for not being able to handle any criticism.
He's also 32, Jet, and Tatum's 23. Durant's been around for a long time.
You're right. Regardless if this quote was fake or not, it's not worth his time to get involved. He's never going to win these arguments. It's stupid.
No.
He just creates more bad will and just furthers the notion of that people already think about him, that he's sensitive and miserable.
Jet, when LeBron announced that he was going to Miami, the decision, his popularity suffered. Durant later that summer tweeted out re-signing with Oklahoma City. He looked like an angel. Like he was becoming the most popular player in the league. He wins the MVP a few years later. That speech was phenomenal. Had his mother crying, had everyone crying. Everyone was like, wow, this is a special young guy, so humble. And then from that point forward, it's like he went from being, the good guy to the heel in wrestling. That now,
but he's not comfortable with being the heel.
He's not comfortable with that. Neither is LeBron James. There aren't many basketball players that are comfortable. This era, they're not. Michael Jordan,
but LeBron James is disciplined enough to not let it affect his personal life and his happiness. He's not comfortable being the heel, but I don't think he gives one sweat off of his brow what Skip Bayless has to say about him. I don't think he lets it bother him. So he might not. He'd prefer to be heaped with adulation. Who wouldn't? But Kevin Durant, he cannot let any slight go unrequited. He can't.
No. And he was still the second pick in the draft. He doesn't have the same start to his career like Tom Brady was 199, who still has that chip on his shoulder. Durant was the second pick. Maybe he's trying to manufacture these things like Jordan did. And Jordan was a third pick. I mean, those two stupid teams that took someone else besides me, I'm going to make them pay. And Paul Pierce, we always heard, wanted to go at it with the teams that didn't draft him till the Celtics took him. But it's not natural for Durant, right? I mean, like I said, Jordan, Kobe, Larry Bird, man, those guys, they loved being booed and visiting arenas. They ate it up. They loved it. It fueled them. It doesn't necessarily work that way. Durant, I don't know many players in the NBA right now that it fuels, especially the really top guys. I think Kawhi is probably oblivious to it.
I think totally.
Westbrook feeds off of it, but he doesn't have the game anymore, really. I mean, he does show flashes, but he's not the player he was, say, 3-4 years ago, so it doesn't really matter. But for the most part, most of these guys want to be loved. But give a lot of credit to Jason Tatum. Now, do you need to get motivated by a tweet from a former player? That's not necessarily a great look. You should be self-motivated, but you know what? The
easier said than
justify
done,
the means. Ends justify the means. I mean, they started playing better, and he started driving to the basketball, and I think he plays better angry anyway. We talked about that in the last podcast. It seems like when Tatum's angry, he plays better.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Sap. Is this going to end up being a weekly segment where we're talking about who Kevin Durant's feuding with next? Because
absolutely, we get a sponsor.
I mean, this is crazy. It's he can't help himself at all. It's like embarrassing to see this guy who's an all-time great talent and has accomplished anything you'd want to accomplish in the NBA, MVP, titles. He looks like they're headed to another title this year. And he's beefing with people on Twitter every day. He's getting blocked on Twitter. He's blocking other people. Like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
What does he do all day? I mean,
I honest to God don't know.
You got a lot of spare time. I get it. Now, obviously, someone like LeBron James got a lot of things going on, right? I mean, he's got kids, a wife, businesses. He keeps himself occupied. Kevin Durant, I don't know his personal life, if he has a significant other. I don't think he has kids.
I don't think he has kids either.
Feeling, I have the feeling he lives in a big house by himself. So what does he do? the day of a game, which he's not even playing many games right now, he's on Twitter all day and he just reacts to it. It's like an old man. He's almost like Donald Trump. Like he can't help himself but to react to Twitter. It really is kind of maddening because the guy is, as a player, it's pristine. I mean, no one's doubting how great he is. I think he needs some help. Maybe we'll do a weekly segment on who Kevin Durant is feuding with, and we'll get it sponsored by Prozac or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it does seem like isn't going away anytime soon. Maybe if he does have a kid, maybe then it'll go away. But in the near future, it seems like he's he's content to just feud with everybody.
Now Jason Tatum has Deuce. I mean, that I'm sure occupies a lot of time. You got a responsibility to make sure you're there for your young son. That's something. I mean, LeBron's got a young son.
And Subway commercials.
Basketball, a lot of Subway commercials, the chips, the Lay's chips, which I understand are really tasty, but you can't get the red dye off your hands. It's like that's an issue.
Maybe tweet at him, ask if he has a solution for that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it to Kevin Durant because then he'd attack.
No, he'd be furious.
Right. Yeah. Don't eat potato chips. Probably call me a fat SOB, which, could be true. But but this is what makes the NBA awesome. I mean, Anthony Edwards doesn't know who A-Rod is, although that's what he says. And Kevin Durant's fighting with Shannon Sharpe. And
next week it could be A-Rod that he's fighting with.
He might. Well, if Durant goes at A-Rod, now we're talking about A-list against A-list. That would be interesting.
Yeah, so we'll see who's feuding with next. It's not gonna. I can tell you this: it's not gonna be long before another one of these crops up because he's got eagle eyes and hawk ears and like the spidey sense for when people are talking about him on social media. But so that's gonna do it, Sap. That's gonna wrap up the show today. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Do you have any articles coming up soon or columns coming up soon on Full Press Coverage, Sap?
Yeah, we're just finishing up the Nikola Jokic's league MVP column. She had to tweak it a little bit once Jamal Murray got hurt and is going to be out for the year. So kind of add a little bit to that. I think he's going to win the MVP. So that's the next one. Might write something on this A-Rod buying the Timberwolves, but maybe we'll even do a column about, Kevin Durant. Can he just put his phone down? Weekly column of, Kevin Durant versus the world, because that's what it feels like.
It certainly does. So be on the lookout for Sap's columns, and I'm sure you'll tweet them out when they come out too. At John Sap 25, at Jet Stryer. You can also find our podcast on my YouTube, youtube.com/Jet Stryer. We're also on fullpresscoverage.com and everywhere podcasts are to be found. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll be back with another podcast probably the next day. When's this coming out? Friday? Saturday we'll have a podcast. You'll hear us. All right. See you, everybody.